Hey, how about that drive in? I guess that's why they call it Sin City, huh? Hi guys, I'm Patrick, and for the past 7 months, I've been traveling with TBB across the globe, exploring different cultures and gaining some new perspective along the way. Back home, I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood. You get the occasional burglary, but overall, it's pretty nice. I went to a small Catholic school in the suburbs, so for the most part, my commute was to and from school. I didn't really see much in between, even if there were just homeless people down the street. I'd see these people when I drove by and think, how terrible. Drive off and they'd be out of sight, out of mind. I had limited experience dealing with poverty, as I haven't ventured far from my house, or for that matter, the States. I've been to Canada and Belize, and Canada doesn't really count. I had no idea what to expect when I left American soil that September day in Miami. So, I met some pretty amazing people on this journey with extremely varied levels of education. In Ecuador, my host brother, Jorge, who's 11, was one example. He showed me how easy it was to accept someone that's completely different from yourself. We didn't like the same foods. He liked rice, fish, and bala, which is unripened plantain. And I was a big fan of spaghetti, which he hated. But he took me into his world without hesitation. Our one common ground was soccer, and through soccer, he showed me how an average Satchela kid lives. He took me to the neighborhood hangout, which was a house with 2 dirt patches that served as a soccer field and a volleyball court. Some of the local kids that I met there were ages from 5 to 18, and I couldn't communicate with them verbally, but through their facial expressions, I could tell I was welcome in the community. Once we started playing, I felt free, like I didn't have a care in the world. I looked around and I saw that all the other kids appeared the same way. It was a feeling that I haven't had since I was a little kid, playing football or hockey in the street with my neighbors. When a goal was scored, we did overzealous celebrations, high-fiving or dancing. When someone made a fool of themselves, the others would give them a hard time, laughing so hard they could barely breathe. Just from that one game, it was clear how fundamentally happy these people were, even though we were playing with a ball that was flat, tattered, and would be considered garbage in the US, and we were playing with goals that were made out of sticks found from the forest or on the road. Some may consider the Satchela people impoverished, as they're lacking in a lot of categories like running water. But after reevaluating my own thoughts about poverty, I'd consider them rich in things like community and family, something that's rare to find in America these days. We had a lot of experiences interacting with the locals in all of our communities, but the experiences that really got me to think and had the most impact on me were the negative ones. India was a bundle of experiences. The minute we stepped foot in Jaipur, we were surrounded by kids with rotten teeth, old dirty clothing, and didn't own a single pair of shoes. Some of them didn't even own pants. And they looked at us with their big brown eyes, arms outstretched, asking us for money or food. This was only a foreshadow of what was to come in the next 6 weeks. I was amazed at the lack of transition there was between wealth and poverty. We stepped off the bus, which was parked next to a squatter camp, and walked maybe 100 yards to our hotel, which I thought was pretty nice. And this wasn't a unique situation. You'd see this everywhere around India. It really helped me understand the gravity of the situation as we were all staying in nicer homes, but the fact that you could look out your window and see some squatters enduring the cold or rummaging through the trash looking for food really helped keep things out of sight, out of mind mentality away. In the long run, I feel like being engulfed in this intense
What is
poverty
the most urgent problem facing the global community? Wow. I don't know because, and I think
Somebody's phone call.
is that people don't know
Claire's playing a video next door, so the audio's hooked up to this room.
Yeah, it's probably gonna go dark soon.
people are facing.
This is one of the hard
And I
things
think
you're
in
living
order
through.
Yeah, exactly.
This
to
is
fix
development.
these problems and to address these issues, they need to know and they need to be aware of it. Like, you can't be passionate about something if you don't understand it, and you can't fix something if you don't know what's happening. And I think, especially in the United States, people live like with this tunnel vision, and
If you tolerate for
they
a
don't
minute, I could push these
know where
buttons
they
so
don't
we can
wanna
see if
know.
that helps.
Sure.
What's the
Yeah.
worst?
No, that's the only video that she has.
Huh? I think it's
It's done. She only has one video in her presentation.
Okay, cool.
Continue.
All right, where was I? India. And so, talking about poverty. In the long run, I feel like being engulfed in all this poverty was good for me, but at the time, running into it everywhere I went really began to take a toll on me. I began to adopt the same mindset as the locals, which was, I can't give you anything, you'll just ask for more. I was annoyed yet heartbroken at the same time. It was in India that I began to assume that I'd become desensitized towards poverty because I'd seen such severe poverty everywhere we'd visited. It wasn't until South Africa that my views began to change. South Africa is possibly the most beautiful place I've ever been. The water is a deep blue color that you really only see on postcards, and some of the mountains there looked unreal. To avoid getting too lost in the natural beauty, we embarked on our work project. We were to shadow caregivers in townships, the communities meant to house cheap labor during the apartheid era, and survey locals about Pledge Aid, the hospice company sponsoring us, as well as note what kind of care was given to patients. During the 5 weeks in the townships, we got to directly work with the locals and heard some of their stories about suffering. In a community that struggles with HIV, you hear a lot about how people cope with the virus. Unfortunately, their coping methods are often through drugs, sex, and alcohol, which only adds to the problem. Commuting from house to house, you'd see groups of people sitting in a circle with a bottle of beer uniting them, talking of the hardships they've had to endure. This was especially frequent to see around the 1st and the 15th, when the disability grants and welfare checks were cashed in. You'd often hear stories of people complaining about not having any food to take with their antiretrovirals, the medicine that combats HIV, because some spend it all on alcohol, while others are tied down with kids or grandkids that were left behind due to HIV or AIDS. Can you blame them? If I were in their situation, I'm sure I'd do the same to get away from the world and its problems, to have a good time, even if it were only for like 30 minutes. But the impact of working hands-on really humanized poverty for me. It's one thing to read or see from a distance, but it's a whole new ballgame when you actually get to know the impoverished in their story. Hearing directly from someone about how their entire family lived in a one-room apartment and had only a singular cabbage to eat is a lot different than reading in a textbook that X amount of people die of starvation per year. It was in South Africa that I really began to develop authentic empathy, even if I didn't know it yet. After 6 months away, I was ready to get back to my home country, good old US of A. I was excited for the Butterfingers, the American sports, and, well, I guess to see my parents. I'd been told that it would be difficult transitioning back to the US, but I figured that wouldn't apply to me because after traveling from place to place, this would just be another city to get used to. Boy, was I wrong. That first day, walking in the streets of DC with my parents, visiting all the museums, I realized that I had become acutely aware of all the poverty around me. It seemed like every corner you went to, you'd see a homeless person bundled up in heavy blankets asking for money. I knew that America had issues, but I had never really encountered them in my daily life. I saw homeless people at home, but once I walked past them, it was often out of sight, out of mind. When I encountered this in DC, their image stuck with me. I felt a sense of agency to help these people, but why? Have things changed that much? It got me thinking, and the answer I came up with was much deeper than what I ever could have expected. Being away for 6 months, you experience some kind of culture shock. It's different for everyone. I looked up the symptoms of culture shock in India, and the one that stuck out the most to me was forget about the bad things at home and only think about the good. I could identify with this symptom as is natural, only talking about the things I missed, never the things I didn't. I've always associated the US with prosperity. Going into all of these communities around the world, you hear people asking you to take them to the States. They think it's a utopia. To hear them talk about how great America is, even though you know it's all assumptions, it creates a stronghold in your mind. So to come home and find that everything wasn't perfect was a bit of shock and a needed wake-up call from my distorted fantasy world of America that I developed while abroad. In addition, working so closely with impoverished people, whether it be the students in India, most of whom were from the lowest caste, or with the citizens of the townships, you learn about their stories and suffering. So when I walk down the street and see a homeless person, I assume that they have a story that's similar to some of the people I met while abroad. I've moved from a sympathetic state of mind to an empathetic state, but why? These people are in legitimate poverty. They lack food, water, and infrastructure. Why do I feel empathetic? We may have had to rough it in some places, but TBB always made sure that our basic needs were met. We never actually lived in poverty. and then we discussed what poverty was. What I took away from that discussion was that poverty isn't one-dimensional. Most people define poverty as not being able to meet their basic needs on a daily basis. And a few weeks ago, I probably would have agreed with them. But now I think it's more than that. It can be social, in the sense that you lack people in your life like family and good friends. There are cases of people dying of broken heart syndrome, which can happen when someone like a spouse dies. Humans are social beings. We need people in our lives to make us happy. It could also be mental. If you lack opportunity or hope in your life, you may end up having some serious problems. Both types of poverty could lead to depression. America has one of the highest depression and alcoholism rates in the world. So if you think about poverty in a multidimensional approach, I believe it's feasible to say that it also has one of the highest poverty rates in the world. But why is this important? I mean, I guess it can be interesting to think of poverty in a non-traditional way, but what's the point? What I got out of thinking poverty as a multidimensional problem is that everyone suffers. I've suffered many times on this trip. Have you ever felt completely alone yet surrounded by people? I have. I'd venture out to say that most people have suffered from some form of poverty in their life. It may not have been long term, it may have only been a few minutes, but they've still experienced suffering. Suffering is different for everyone, but it's universal. It's a common ground for everyone. So when I see someone on the street enduring the cold, I can show them some empathy. I won't be giving money, which in the long run won't help to do much, but I want to get to know them, find out their story, see if I can help improve their life with the resources I have. Obviously, their struggle is much greater than mine, but the fact that I know what it feels like to suffer makes it easier to identify with them. So what do I do with this now? It's great that I have a deeper understanding of poverty and I can approach a multitude of issues from different sides, but how will this help in the long run? For me, I came on this program looking for some direction of what I want to do with the rest of my life. My experience and reflections have helped me guide that. My dad always said to do something that helps people. Before this trip, I was considering doing something that I would absolutely love, but wouldn't necessarily make a positive impact on the world. I was okay with driving away, but now I can't go down that road. I need to impact people's lives. I can't drive away anymore. Thank you. Mention it is because I didn't really see all that much poverty. We were in like the smaller farming village, and while they didn't have like the most developed housing projects or anything, I never really felt like anyone was in poverty there. They always had like plenty of food since they all worked on a farm, and they always seemed like they had their basic needs met.
What about the pollution inside? Does that bother some food?
So, well, we were in Kunming, which is the green city, for 2 of the weeks, and so the pollution there wasn't too bad. And the village we were was like 2 hours away from Kunming, and so the pollution there wasn't bad. I mean, the smell there was pretty terrible, but that was, I think, mainly from the farming and all the fertilizer. But really the only time I noticed the pollution was when we were flying from Kunming to, what is it, Gongswao? I can't. Yeah. And there, I mean, that was the only time I really noticed it, and it just looked incredibly foggy, which I'm assuming is all the smog. Yes.
So your presentation, underscored for me something that maybe was a little obvious, but not until you mentioned it, which is in Ecuador, in El Poste, is a pretty homogeneous community.
Yeah.
And the farming village is a pretty homogeneous community. But both in India and South Africa, the contrast, it's a study in contrasts.
Very different, yeah.
Which makes it very acute. So one of the questions, I'm going to ask you now an unfair question, which I've also asked Carl, which is in India, and maybe I should really be asking Stephen and others, was there much discussion about Hinduism and its role in perpetuating the poverty?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm not all that familiar with Hinduism, but I mean, you could definitely see it among the castes. Well, I know the caste system was made illegal, but you definitely see the difference among classes, and you don't really see people from higher castes associating with lower castes. Also, I thought it was interesting, caste system also kind of determined dietary needs, or diet. So the higher caste would be strictly vegetarian, or some of them even vegan. In the lower caste system, they would eat meat, like they would even eat like pig, which is considered pretty dirty in India. So you don't really see much association of higher caste and lower caste. We had the unique opportunity of working with an NGO funded school, and so like the guy who was there for us, he was part of the highest caste. He was part of the Sharma caste, and all the kids there were from like the lowest caste. So that was really the only time I saw association between the two. Yes.
Did you read The Spirit Level, the book The Spirit Level?
I didn't.
It's, but to your argument that poverty is multidimensional, it shows, it's a fantastic book, and it's nothing to do with spirit, but it has to do with poverty, looking at inequality across nations and then across the U.S. states. And it shows that and it's very well documented, 2 statisticians wrote the book, shows a whole series of health indicators, trust indicators, as a function of inequality within that nation. And it shows that that inequality affects not just the poor, but it affects the rich, so that in countries that have more inequity, you have much lower levels of trust across people. And so it bolsters your argument on the multidimensionality of poverty, but what's nice about it is it provides you with the actual data and the facts that you can pick any health indicator or any social indicator and pull that up relative to inequity.
No, that's really interesting. I'll have to check that out. I mean, we saw a lot of that in South Africa, especially. I think like the 9%, which is like 9% of their country is white, and generally they pay all the country's taxes. And so they definitely, I know in another PO, I don't want to ruin it for you, but they said they definitely have to pay attention to the poverty there, otherwise it'll like show up on their front door. And so I thought that's an interesting book. I'll have to check that out. Yes?
Does your approach to poverty change with an empathetic state of mind versus sympathetic?
Definitely. Before, I'll try and put this short, but before I basically just wanted to do something to help them like short term, like food or money or something. And now, like, I feel that's not sustainable, and it should be something in the long run, like helping them get back on their feet, find a job or a place to live or something like that. All right, if there's not any more questions.
Good job, Patrick.
Good job.